From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. It was a busy day here in the State House as the Alabama legislature gathered for the 8th day of the 2023 regular session. Leading the news of the day was the final passage of a bill changing the state's good behavior incentive law for prisoners, better known as good time. Under current law, certain inmates sentenced to 15 years or fewer can earn up to 75 days off their sentence for every 30 days of good behavior behind bars. That policy came under scrutiny last year when an inmate released early for good time allegedly shot and killed Bibb County Deputy Sheriff Brad Johnson. Senate Bill 1 from Senator April Weaver would amend that law to allow only 30 days off a sentence for 30 days of good behavior. It would also tighten up what qualifies as good behavior and how it is accrued. Representative Russell Bedsole carried the bill in the House, where it passed on a party line vote of 78 to 24.
When we had the tragic events that occurred back in June of 2022 in Bibb County, Deputy Brad Johnson was murdered serving his community. And what it did is, as we began taking a look back at a tragedy and trying to find a way to make something good happen with something that was so tragic, we began taking a hard look at the good time, the correction incentive time law in our state that had been on the books since 1980. And what we saw is Alabama was 5.5 times more lenient than the national average across the country. And it's just not a position in which we felt comfortable as Alabamians standing. We want to be firm on crime. But let me say this, I think it's an excellent opportunity that if we can have these inmates that are entered into the correction system and serving the days inside of our facility, then we have to take advantage of that time, and we have to do what we can to educate and rehabilitate these offenders. Incarceration alone is not the answer. What I'm hoping through this legislation is it allows our Department of Corrections to reevaluate the time in which these individuals will be there, and then we're going to make good use of it. We're going to begin to educate and rehabilitate because we want these offenders to return to the street more productive than when they entered the facility, and that should be the goal of any correction system.
Attorney General Steve Marshall advocated strongly for the law change. He was in the State House today, watching from the gallery as the bill was passed and sent on its way to the governor.
I think, first of all, it acknowledges and recognizes the life of Brad Johnson. I think it was an important statement for this legislature to not only name the bill after him, because it is his death that really shone the light on many of the deficiencies that this bill changes. Number one, we're excited the fact that good time credit is actually going to be exactly that we're not going to reward bad behavior. We're going to incentivize inmates not to harm one another, not to harm guards, and not to escape from prison. And then beyond that, it makes sure that we're doing good time responsibly with regard to the number of days that are granted to those that are eligible. If it adds to an overcrowding problem, it's because inmates won't follow the law. They won't abide by the rules. This is in the hands of those in the facility to abide by their responsible actions to do the things they're supposed to be able to do. The only way that this contributes to somebody being longer in prison is if they're eligible, they don't take advantage of what's given to them. This incentivizes good behavior. It doesn't cause somebody to stay longer.
Up in the Senate, today a committee gave the first approval to part of the economic incentives package known as the Game Plan. Senate Bill 165 from Senator Arthur Orr creates avenues for the development of industry-ready sites, or amended the bill to give more areas of the state the opportunity to attract industry.
It allows for those counties and areas that have more mountainous territories that are not wide open green spaces to be eligible to participate. So we took the acreage down from 200 acres minimum acreage to down to 75 minimum acreage. And according to Secretary Canfield, that's acceptable. That is pretty much the bottom, but it will certainly help more mountainous counties be able to participate in this program to develop sites for future projects.
Another part of the Game Plan is a bill to ensure transparency by requiring all industrial recruiting incentives to be posted online. Senate Bill 151 is sponsored by Senator Garland Gudger. He amended the bill in committee to allow joint economic development boards first access to that information.
There's a board that was created from the House and from the Senate legislators on both sides that come together to meet with the Department of Commerce and anybody else that we come in to look at the vision of where economic development is going in the future. And from that, we wanted that particular board to have more information than what was going to be transparent on the website that is listed in the bill. And you have, I believe, 10 things that were going to be listed on the bill of estimated return on investment, how many jobs are estimated this particular investment is going to create. And as we went forward, we thought that that board, if they needed more information for the next 5 years, that they should be able to go in and get that information besides just what is already in the bill. That's all.
The committee also advanced legislation dealing with school resource officers, or SROs. Under current law, retired law enforcement who go on to work as an SRO have their pay capped at $30,000 in order to keep receiving their state retirement benefits. Senate Bill 174, also from ORR, would ignore that cap when an officer is working extracurricular activities.
And the reason, as it was explained to me, the SROs know the school kids, they know who's good, who's bad, who they got to watch, who's trouble, and all those things. And right now, they're able to do their jobs in the schools under the cap, the current cap. But when it comes to extracurricular activities, that would exceed the cap, so they're not able to participate. So school system has to go out and hire private security force or get a different SROs or whatever that don't know the kids and don't know who to watch and who's trouble, and they don't know the layout of the school in case there is a problem there. So it seemed like a logical small exception to make to help the security of the schools.
A proposal to end the state sales tax on groceries gained momentum today in more ways than one. First, a new poll shows strong support for the idea across the political spectrum. The poll, first reported by Alabama Daily News and conducted by the Alabama Republican Party, shows that 83% of all voters support cutting the state's sales tax on groceries. The issue was juxtaposed to the idea of sending taxpayers a one-time income tax rebate check. Asked which they prefer, 82% chose a grocery tax cut, while only 18% chose the tax rebate. Again, the poll was conducted by the Alabama Republican Party and surveyed 1,610 registered voters. Then today at noon, dozens of Alabamians gathered on the State House steps advocating for eliminating the state sales tax on groceries. Organized by Arise, the rally concluded with advocates going into the State House to encourage lawmakers to act this year. State Representative Penni McClammy and State Senator Marika Coleman told the group they plan to introduce legislation in the coming days.
So we want to see, as soon as possible, ASAP, untaxed groceries. A poll came out this morning. Democrats and Republicans, over 70% agree we need to untax groceries, and 80% actually said they would prefer that to a one-time rebate.
Ooh, yes.
So, y'all, there's no excuse, the time is now. Number two, we would like to protect the legacy of our education and our kids' future. That means we can't afford to cut $600 million with no replacement.
That's right.
So over time, we must see, we can afford it right now, but in the future, we're going to have to pay for this. And we think that, as you have said, Senator Coleman, there are more fair ways to fund education than funding the food out of people's mouths.
Yes.
Taxing the food out of people's mouths. Number three, we want the broadest possible proposal. We don't want to see the government saying, oh, we'll only untax healthy food. No, we want to be able to buy the food that we need, that we know is healthy for us and our families.
Also at the State House today was a group advocating for school choice. Legislation known as the PRICE Act was filed today in the House and Senate. PRICE stands for Parental Rights in Children's Education. The bills would allow parents to set aside a portion of their income taxes that would flow to the Education Trust Fund and use it to send their child to a school of their choice, including private schools, charter schools, or a different district school. State Senator Larry Stutz and State Representative Ernie Yarbrough are the sponsors.
Competition makes everybody better. When you look at the data from other states, most people are satisfied with their school. There's not going to be a mass exodus from public schools to this. approximately 2% of students usually move when a freedom bill like this is passed. And so we're not looking at a mass exodus from one school to another, but it simply gives parents the freedom and the choice to do it. The parents that are already making that choice, it gives them additional resources to improve their child's education.
What we love about this is that this won't turn into some bureaucratic nightmare where the government is just controlling what's happening with private schools and homeschools. These people that are using the program actually have a voice and will be helping the Department of Revenue run this program. In Alabama, we have wonderful laws that regulate homeschooling in Alabama. We have laws that regulate private schools in Alabama. 8 times in this bill, it reiterates that those laws remain unchanged, and this is just a funding bill that helps put the parents' money that the state has already taken from them to educate their child. It now goes back into an account to be used for that child.
And those are your highlights from legislative action today. We'll be right back with State Representative Penni McClammy.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Joining me next is State Representative Penni McClammy from Montgomery. Representative, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Oh, thank you for the invitation.
Well, it's been a big day for your signature issue this year. That's cutting the sales tax, the state sales tax on groceries. You've been working on this for months, if not longer.
Actually, that was part of my, when I was first elected in November 2021, that was part of my campaign speech.
Really?
My election speech, saying that would be one of my focal points in working on repealing the sales tax of the state off of groceries.
Mm-hmm. So years, you've been working on this for years, but a big day today. And first, this morning we reported on this poll that came out from the Republican Party,
yes,
saying overwhelming support, 83% of all voters supporting ending the sales tax on groceries. Then today at noon, you were a big part of this rally at the State House steps where dozens of folks came together to ask the legislature, please, make this the year to end the sales tax on groceries. So tell me, what kind of day has it been? Does it give you a hope for your bill?
I'm excited. I am excited. I tell people all the time when I go out to speak with them that you elect us to be your mouthpiece, but we need your support. We need for you to come down to the State House, look at the legislators in their eyes and tell them what's important to you. And that's why I appreciate organizations such as Alabama Rise and others, because they had that rally. This was not the first year they've been here. They were here before. They've been here for years. As that message they continually put out, the message that you can continue to put out by allowing us to come on your show to educate the public on about the state tax, educate the public about us being one of 3 states that still have a tax on our groceries. And due to the overwhelming support of you all letting us put that message out there, I think the people understand that we need to do something about repealing the state, at least the state portion of the tax on groceries.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was out there for some of the rally. Look, you're right. This happens every year.
Every year.
There's a rally.
Yes, I was there last year.
This year was different, though, because I think in years past, sure, they came to the State House, but I don't think there was ever a real hope, at least last several years, that it was actually going to happen. There were smiles on those faces. I think they feel a momentum that wasn't there. You've got, you're working with a Republican. There's a bipartisan thing. It seems to have some legs. So talk about that in terms of, does it feel different this year?
It does. I always have to start off and say, first of all, I'm standing on the steps of others before me. I just came in November 2021. But this is an issue that I heard not only on the news, but at the dinner table.
With your father, right?
Right, exactly. You know, Representative John Knight, former Representative John Knight, he introduced this bill years ago. And this has been a conversation for several years. And my father, the Representative Thad McClammy, they had these discussions throughout the years. And everyone was for it, but, you know, then we had Representative Mary Moore from Birmingham, the Jefferson County area. She brought legislation forth. And so I'm standing on those steps of others before me. They kept pushing this issue into the community, kept pushing this issue here at the State House, and it's exciting. It's exciting to be here at the State House. They see the public hears us. They hear it. I think they felt it during some terminus times that we had during COVID, where that was the point where not only certain levels of people in the community felt it, but everyone was able to feel, I don't care if it's $5, $10, or 10 cents more on your grocery bill, that we felt that pinch during those times that we were dealing with economic hardships, and especially now when we're going through inflation.
Mm-hmm. So we're likely to see, you know, half a dozen different grocery tax repeal proposals. I know you are working with Senator Andrew Jones.
Correct.
We've spoken to him a little bit. It's not final, no finished legislation, but walk me through the high points of what you want legislation to look like.
Well, what I want legislation to look like is, first of all, I want to see some type of relief immediately. You know, I don't want to wait until next year if we don't have to.
Okay.
I want to see it immediately. The people have spoken. You just told us about the polls. You told us about them being out there with smiles on their faces. The citizens have spoken. So I think the sooner the better. I would like to see that we see some type of rollback on sales, the tax on groceries from the state side. Secondly, we also know that one issue that's come up every year is how do we replace the education trust fund? Because we know that the sales tax from the grocery sales goes into the education trust fund. So of course we want to be careful when it comes to the education of our children and the necessities that they need. Mm-hmm. And so right now we are working on the surplus. I know you've heard it around the State House and everywhere else that we're in a surplus, and that's good.
$2.8 billion. Right?
Exactly. So with that surplus, we do not want to actually ask for a replacement right now. We don't have to since we have it, but we do want to work towards one when the time is ready.
Okay, so that's interesting. Using some of that surplus for the immediate, like you said, you want an immediate benefit, you know, so not necessarily worrying about that hit to the ETF, but perhaps in the future finding a solution.
And that could be 6 months down the road. But I do want to find immediate relief now. Mm-hmm. You know, we buy groceries every day. You know, we're not going to buy groceries and wait until next year and say, okay, well, this says that we're going to start taking off taxes off our groceries next year. We buy them now. So I'd like to see something happen immediately.
Well, to your point, you know, when people were talking about, and still are, I suppose, about tax rebates.
Yes.
They said the same thing. We want these checks to go out immediately, right? Because we need people to have them, and dealing with inflation and all that. I guess sort of the same principle, though, dealing with grocery tax. You don't want to wait 6 months or a year. You want it to happen right away.
Right, but one thing I do want to see, I don't want to see an immediate hit of some type of repeal on sales tax. I want it to be continuously.
Okay.
And you know, when you talk about rebates, that's a one-time thing. And this is something we buy groceries every day. Mm-hmm. You know, someone is purchasing groceries. We have to have food to live. And so my point that I always say is, why are we taxing the very substance that's going to make that we have to purchase to live?
Mm-hmm. And I want to get to that in more detail in a second, but let me just go back to the Education Trust Fund.
Yes.
That's been the reason all these years.
Decades. That has been the issue.
Hit to the ETF, and it's kind of grown as the ETF has grown, but you know, they're estimating about $600 million less would flow into the Education Trust Fund. You know, I'm hearing more and more people say that because of these surpluses, because our budgets have gone up and up over the years, that $600 million hit isn't what it used to be in terms of, you know, the actual effect on schools and the political effect that everybody taking that vote would feel. So, I mean, do you feel like there's a political necessity for that revenue replacement, or is there some wiggle room?
I think we have wiggle room right now.
Okay.
To answer that question.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, you started talking about the need for this. You said one of only 3 states?
One of only 3.
And I think we should be clear that, the state sales tax isn't everything.
No, it's not. It's 4%.
Right.
For instance, in Montgomery County where I live, it's 10% right now.
Because that's city and
city and county. Right. And so that's 4% of the 10. 4 cents off of the 10 cents.
Right.
So we're trying to take off the state tax, which is the 4 cents.
Mm-hmm. Do you fear that some counties and cities out there would go and try to hike their sales tax up 4% to offset it, and maybe think nobody will notice because the prices wouldn't really change?
And that's one thing that we have taken into consideration since day one when we were working on this bill, to try to put some type of safeguards in place. Right now, it is constitutionally known that local and county government should not go above where our state tax is. So the 4 cents, it should not go past where it's set now. So with that being said, right now we have some type of statutory terms in there, but we do want to ensure that when we do pass legislation, that we don't see an increase in local and county government.
Mm-hmm.
So when we take the 4 cents off, it comes up in another local or county in some type of capacity.
Of course, if somewhere out there tried that, I think you'd have some county commissioners and city councilmen maybe in some political heat, themselves.
Well, I always say you go to the polls and you vote your voice.
Yeah. During your remarks today on
Yes.
on the steps, you talked about personally feeling this issue,
Most
in
definitely.
your role as a caregiver. Talk about that.
Okay, as I stated earlier, I moved back here in 2006. I always had a law practice here, but I was also in school and teaching at Florida State down in Tallahassee, Florida. In 2006, I moved back to Montgomery, Alabama. My mother and grandmother were very ill at the time, and so I was going back and forth, but I permanently moved back, I should say. Mm-hmm. Throughout that time of 16 plus years, I've taken care of 6 family members, grandparents, great aunts, and my parents. During that time, as I tell people, my parents and my grandparents were educators. And when they retired, their retirement that they brought home each month was less than what they made when they were working. Mm-hmm. So most educators and others are working on a budget that's less than they make when they retire.
It's a fixed income.
It's a fixed income, and that's why a lot of times you see our teachers, when they retire, they go get part-time jobs. Mm-hmm. And so my family being sick at the time, they were unable to go get part-time jobs. We were on a fixed income. And there were decisions that had to be made in the home. Do you buy Depends? We have to buy Insure. Although I lived with each and every one of them, there were times, because I have a full-time job, I may have to hire a sitter to be there. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, I would be honest, I had to hire someone just so I could go to sleep and get some rest. And so when you have those things because if you make a certain amount of income, you may not qualify for Medicaid and get extra benefits that you may be able to receive. And so it's a financial hurt sometimes, strain, I guess I should say, on the family. So during this time, my family and I, we had to pool our incomes together to ensure that we could make sure that we had everything for our family members as they were sick. I had family members that also traveled to different facilities out of state. That was a cost. Mm-hmm. And so when you sit there each month and you make a decision, buying Depends, paying utilities, buying your Insure, buying your paddings, buying your, I said even like aspirin, because the doctor prescribes aspirin for blood thinners. That's a cost, and that's a tax. And then you have to pay for food. Mm-hmm. And you say, well, we don't think about it, but like we said earlier, the numbers that we received, that $600 a year, a household of 4 pays on sales tax. That may not seem much to many, but it's much to us, because that's the amount that we could spend on a sitter for a week. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you talking about the real world impact of it, because we tend to get lost in the dollars and cents and the budgets and the line items and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
But the real world impact, I think, is important. Last question while I still have you. I meant to ask you, there's this conversation between whether we make it WIC the Women, Infants, and Children qualifications, or SNAP. SNAP would be more generous,
Right.
offer more groceries. WIC, more limited selection. Where's your bill?
SNAP.
SNAP, okay.
Yes, we were most definitely for SNAP. You know, it's important, as our doctors all tell us, exercise and eat healthy foods. But as I tell people, when you go to the grocery store and make those healthy food choices, sometimes those are the most expensive choices to make in the grocery store. And then on top of that, you have to put a tax on top of it. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a broad range of foods that would be included in when you go to the grocery store, that the sales tax would be replaced off of.
Interesting. Well, that's going to be one of the decision points as this bill goes forward. We're out of time. Representative McClammy, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for the invitation.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night right here on Alabama Public Television with more coverage of the Alabama legislature. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.